jobs, roles. Talent is a phrase we've often used about in this field. And I think before we talked about this podcast, and you were suggesting topics that you feel passionate about, it was the fact that you observed that perhaps people working in this industry, although information jobs, data jobs, technology jobs are cool, a lot of the jobs in market data, I think wrongly, are seen as being a bit uncool. And I think you alluded to, a lot of them have slipped into pure procurement type situations. Why or is market data jobs uncool? Or is that wrong?
Yeah,
Discuss.
I think you've hit the nail right on the head. And when we were at WIFIC in Austin, Texas last year, I had the privilege of chairing a talent panel, and we talked about this. I posed this question, and it's a question when I was Chief Revenue Officer at LSEG that I would rather shamelessly challenge a lot of our clients around the way they were approaching engaging with providers in the industry, very much around this procurement type model, which I think it is what it is, but it's causing us to miss a lot of opportunities. And let's just step back a little bit. If you look at the world now, there are very few companies in the world that aren't basing their business on some kind of data and analytics. To look at if they're online and they're using data and analytics to find customers, to promote offerings. It's hard to find an industry where data isn't performing an important part of either their logistics or their sales strategy. So when you think about it, the financial industry was probably one of the first sectors of commerce and industry that was using data so intensely, and all kinds of businesses set up around to serve that. And not surprisingly, data became the second largest cost for most organizations in terms of their expense lines. And if you look at recent history, let's go back to 2007. I guess that's not that recent, 18 years ago, when the financial markets went into another spin and cost cutting became a huge issue. Many of our clients put a cost czar as a report into either the CEO or the COO, and market data became a huge target for cost cutting. I would argue that market data roles, even before then, were seen as a procurement function, but they became laser focused on cost being really the driving strategy.
But weren't we, to some extent, victims of our own success? That point you made about it being the second largest basically has grown into that. It's become such an enormous cost that generically, a lot of firms, if they're trying to be more profitable, you can grow your way into success. Another way of being more profitable is to cut costs. And cutting costs, a lot of consultancies are out there giving advice to corporations on how to slash costs. And again, I remember seeing a TV program. At what point do you stop cutting off fat and start slicing into muscle?
Yeah, and also, I think you're right, but also in terms of stifling innovation. Just think about this. I would say that there are many, many, many financial institutions buying market data that do everything in their power to stop ideas from providers coming into their organization because they want to limit the demand for information. That is really counter innovation if you think about it. The better way to be thinking about it is, if I'm in a market data role, how do I, find a way to be able to get more innovation, more data, and more analytics into my organization? And then how to find a way to have that be starting to drive the top line of the firm as opposed to it just being a cost.
And to be fair to our industry, and maybe be focused on procurement, there are obviously, because it's such an enormous part of customer firms, banks, buy-side institutions, what they buy, having procurement to professionally buy that is a good idea. And there are whole tranches of people really getting into the detail of how to do procurement in the right way. But there are lots of other market data roles. If we're talking about on the customer side of the equation, there are the business analysts, who I suppose are the people going out talking to the quote unquote business, the actual end users, and trying to understand what their needs are. And I suppose that innovation drives innovation. If the end users, a trader or a portfolio manager or somebody sitting in a role in a bank or a buy side institution is innovating how they do trading,
Yeah.
then they might want more different, newer, better data. And it's the job of the business analyst to then come back perhaps and work with the procurement person to buy it off. And you and I think, have worked predominantly on the sales side of the equation. There are
Yeah.
equivalent roles in sales organizations. So there's lots of
Yeah.
layers of roles.
Yeah. Look, also, let me just make sure I'm not sending the wrong message here. I think I had the great privilege of having fabulous customer relationships with some people in market data that were really, really very thoughtful and were really pushing us in terms of innovation and looking to do exactly what I, have just said, the industry should be aspiring to. The challenge comes from the top, where I think the financial institution, I can't begin to tell you how many times I would have a conversation at the COO level or the CEO level and say, share with me your top 3 strategic issues. Number 1 was cost. Now, if number 1 of a strategic issue is cost, then the people working in the organization are obviously going to be skewed to a certain set of priorities that's going to drive the success of the firm through that lens and in turn their own compensation. But I don't think we just put this problem at the feet or the hands of the clients or the buyers or the market data professionals. I think the way I looked at it at Refinitiv was, how do we do something as a provider to work with the industry to solve this challenge? And in fact, we did, without shamelessly plugging
Go
any
on, go on.
organization, but I will, because I still, have huge affection for my alma mater. We launched Refinitiv Access, which was a new commercial model designed to put us into that role of consultant that you talked about. Why would you pay a third party consulting firm to come in and tell you where you can take cost out of your market data? An organization like Refinitiv or other organizations that we competed with certainly have the ability, in looking across the customer base, to see where those opportunities are. So take that concept. If what we were able to do in a lot of instances were develop trusted relationships with clients that were willing to partner with us, get inside their organization and understand where the cost reduction opportunities were, and transition that entire business model from this very procurement oriented relationship to one of real innovation. And to my knowledge, that commercial model is still serving Refinitiv quite well.
And I think
Again, I should say, a recommendation on the stock price or whatever the disclaimer would be, but I think that's the kind of partnership the industry needs.
And I think that partnership, you use the word trust, but it also is based on the fact that on both sides having a detailed understanding of each other, because that's something a hobby horse of mine, and slightly self-serving, is the knowledge and skills in the industry need to come up and up and up on all sides, both the vendor side, people selling stuff, but it also on the consuming side of the equation. Because I think if we want to play in this grown-ups game, the game is an awful lot more complicated. When I started as a Teller 8 salesman, green screen, sorry to go back in history, it was a lot simpler. It really was a lot simpler. The financial markets were a lot simpler in the 80s. And I think things have got so much more complicated, complex, whatever the right word is. The skills and the knowledge of the people working in that need to be a lot higher. But it also, the rewarding side of that is intellectually much more stimulating. Whether it's financial, I think it is, as a career set, financially rewarding if you get into the right parts of it. It might not be as well paid as an equity trader at a big investment bank who are earning millions. You might not be at that level, but it's still, better than working, frankly, in other industries, working in pharmaceuticals or, I don't know, steel engineering or something like that. We are a well-paid sector.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, look, we are a well-paid sector, However, I think certainly one of the challenges for financial markets on a compensation level in the more off trading floor roles, is competing with, the other new entrants, if you would want to call the Googles and the Amazons new entrants. But
Yeah.
in terms of the financial markets, there is definitely a dynamic there, and there's a dynamic there about the cool factor. But this whole issue about competition for talent, every single company, I believe, is dealing with as the biggest existential issue that we have. COVID was a massive disruptor to the whole talent landscape, and organizations are still trying to work out, are we an in-office culture? Are we a fully remote culture? Are we a hybrid culture? And that's a huge factor these days in terms of competing for talent. Especially every person I know that is earlier in their career, have a very explicit view of, I want to come to an office because I want that mentoring, to I don't want a job that's in an office. So that itself is a huge factor. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of AI and what that does in terms of talent. Talent is
I
the biggest issue. The boards that I'm on, both for profit and non-profit, not in financial industry, it is the biggest single strategic discussion that we have, talent.